we need to focus on telling a story and telling a narrative. And a story, you'll hear me say it over and over again, has to have a beginning, middle, and an end. And when you're deep in the weeds of something, you tend to skip to the end. People skip over the beginning and the middle. And the beginning tends to be the problem statement, the context. The middle tends to be your options for approaching it, and then the end tends to be your action and your path forward. And again, a lot of people stew at that action path forward and start to spin there.
Visionary voices, bold breakthroughs. This is Shally's Alley, where top recruiting minds spill their best-kept secrets live every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Raw, unfiltered conversations on sourcing, hiring, and the future of talent, where we ask the tough questions no one else will. Tune in and level up.
Because they haven't really focused on the problem statement and getting themselves aligned to that, and then also aligned to the options that they have in front of them for addressing that.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Meg and Amy Show. Today we are interviewing Jen Morrow. She is an amazing former colleague of ours who has a superpower in building board-ready business cases with aplomb. So we're super excited to have her join us. Jen is currently SVP of Strategy, Transformation, and People for PlanSource, a Vista Equity portfolio company. Under her tremendous leadership, PlanSource has increased bookings by over 100%, increased employee engagement by 14 points, and increased customer satisfaction by more than 8%, all within a year. Prior to joining PlanSource, Jen was Chief Operating Officer and Head of Strategy for SAP SuccessFactors, where we knew her and appreciated her gifts of simplifying complexity, aligning stakeholders, and doing it all with humility, curiosity, and a strong sense of fun. In addition to all of Jen's corporate accomplishments, her impact on the world comes in the form of animal rescue, fostering, and placement at her home in Indianapolis, Indiana. Welcome, Jen.
Hello.
Before we dive into the meatier topics of the day, I wanted to ask you how and when you developed animal rescue as a passion and centerpiece of your life.
Yes, question near and dear to my heart. So when my husband Dave and I first were dating, a neighbor of his was looking for a home for a dog that they couldn't care for anymore. And we took this dog in and kind of took it in as our own. And she was insane, like literally crazy, like an 18-month-old puppy. And we were a house full of, he had an elderly Cocker Spaniel and an elderly poodle at the time. And we took in this 18-month-old boxer mix who had all of the energy in the world. We had no idea what to do with this dog, and this was kind of before the internet was a thing. So I just started calling people. We got connected with a great trainer. We learned how to navigate her, and then learned a lot about that there were just a lot of dogs in the world in need of a home, and in need of some patience and some dedication. And we kind of realized that we had some gifts with that. And so that started our long journey to fostering and animal advocacy.
And how many animals have you fostered over the years?
Goodness, I actually meant to do a count a few weeks ago, but it is well over 40 at this point in time.
Honestly, Jen, I realized, when our dog was aging that forget doing any internet search, just call Jen and ask for ideas. How do I get my dog to take medicine? How do I get my dog moving? How do I get, any question, you have not just a wealth of information, but a lot of really practical tips. So hats off to you. I guess 40 is a good path to getting a lot of expertise in this.
And I'm always open for those kind of questions because I want to help people make the most of their relationship with their animals.
And as far as I could tell, you've really developed like a fostering playbook,
Yeah.
basically,
Yep.
right? So like what are your main tenets of that playbook?
Yeah, the biggest one is allow for decompression time. So the animal that you take into your house on day one, whether it's a dog you found on the street, a dog that you pull out of a shelter, a dog that you take for rescue, or even like a puppy that you adopt, the animal that you bring in on day one is not the same animal that you will have 3 to 4 weeks. So the key is when you bring them in, kind of treat them, I always say for people who have human children, treat them like an infant or a toddler as far as keep them on a schedule. They will fight the schedule initially, but just have patience and allow them time to decompress and kind of get to know you and get to know your surroundings before you do things like throwing them in with your other animals, or taking them. The worst thing you can do is take like a brand new dog like out into the world and throw it into a big dog park when you don't even know anything about it. Allow them time to observe and watch, and also get some good sleep, because most of them haven't slept for a good long time, which means they are like a 2-year-old who hasn't napped for 2 days. And so they act a little crazed. We call it the wild-eyed phase. And then at some point in the first couple of weeks, we call it the rescue sigh. They let out this big, huge sigh and kind of look at you with softer eyes, and that's kind of when you can communicate with them and that you're connecting with the real animal that's inside there.
So it's helping them feel safe.
Yep.
And that they don't have to worry about outside things happening to them, and making sure that they signal to you that I'm here now, I'm feeling safe. How interesting that that's so much like how we are as humans, but just more insightful to the non-spoken parts of that.
Yep, it's exactly it. And like a lot of parents, like when they start thinking about it in terms of their children, obviously animals are much more simple, but it is that like you kind of have to earn their trust, and give them that space and that agency to kind of be themselves and come out of that shell, and just don't push them too far too fast. One of my favorite lines in rescue and also in business is that you can definitely go too fast, but you can never go too slow. And you have to find that perfect balance between the two.
Interesting. What a great transition to my question, which is about your day job. So your current executive role is very unique. It has strategy, transformation, and people. And I just am adoring this combination. Tell me more about how this came about and how you see this as a model for future leadership, because I think it's really powerful.
Yeah, thanks for asking the question, because it's something I'm very passionate about, as you know. So I was brought on to Plan Source in August of last year to lead strategy and transformation. And then in January of this year, I was asked by the CEO to take on people. And we talked a lot about that at that time, about title, and about, do we want it CHRO, Chief People Officer, and all those things. And we landed on that we wanted to keep the strategy on transformation and people bit, because we had been delivering the message that we were delivering a people-focused transformation. So Plan Source is in the midst of a massive transformation. We have changed out our entire leadership team since June of last year, and have established kind of one of the first ever strategies of the business, at least in the last couple of years, and are deep in rallying our team around that and rallying all of our priorities for the business towards achieving that mission. And so we had really focused on that strategy and transformation bit with our teams. And then as we rolled the HR team underneath that, we all felt it was imperative to say, we are bringing these teams together with the intention of saying, this is a concerted, holistic team effort. This is not just a leadership team effort, because to some people it was really looking, when you go through that massive of a leadership team change that fast, it was was almost looking like a top-down change, and we're like, oh, no, 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 this is a bottoms-up change. And how can we do that? How can we combine these topics together under one umbrella and really energize the entire team behind that? So a big, long title, whether it'll stay forever, I don't know, but each of the words has a very unique meaning to myself and to my team and to the organization, so we're holding on to it for right now, so that people understand what we're doing and how important they are to our mission.
Well, you really are a master of transformation, Jen. And I remember when I was attempting to take on a giant transformation at SAP, that was a point when you and I first got a chance to work together really closely, and you just completely blew me away with your ability to articulate with simple visuals and language all of the gnarly things in my head. And you helped me build a business case and present it and win it even, and be able to actually execute on this transformation in my head. So when did you know that this was a gift of yours? Like when did this kind of appear to you, and how did you foster and grow it?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Kind of the first time I found out that it was a gift was shortly after I transitioned from SAP proper to SuccessFactors. So for those folks who don't know, SuccessFactors is the cloud HCM solution where Amy, Meg, and I met. But they were acquired by SAP, I believe it was in 2013. And in 2014, I got the opportunity to transition over from SAP to SuccessFactors. And a woman by the name of Mary Poppin, and Mary, if you're listening, hello to you, was COO of SuccessFactors at the time. And she's the one who told me, Jen, you have a gift for looking at the messy stuff and figuring it out. She's the first one to recognize that in me. And via that, I was kind of able to see it a bit and then continue to grow and develop and foster it, because I think Meg is another one who pointed out to me that some of it just comes naturally to me. I believe it's anchored in the fact that I started my career as an implementation consultant and spent most of my time there, where you get paid and your job is to make really complicated, especially SAP, ERP, and HCM implementations simple for those people who are using it. And I got trained in that by some of the best in the business. And then being able to switch that and apply it to the business context, seemed natural to me. But I realized a lot of people never make that switch. Most people who go from implementation actually move over to the product side, like the two of you, and have to develop that. You guys do it, but just do it in a different fashion. I kind of switched that. Rather than going to product, I went to the natural business side of it. And then really was able to continue to foster that throughout SuccessFactors, because I always say I spent many years there just being the fix-it person. Like, they're like, we got this messy problem, Jen, can you go figure it out? And I was never figuring it out on my own. It was like, gather the people, the brains, put the people together, and leverage their brains to figure it out, but help them identify what that end state is, what that goal, and help them not panic in the process of getting there. So I got the ability to do things like everything from go to market. How are we going to be able to expand internationally when we have a pretty North America based product and a North America based selling motion, to how are we going to split our instances between test and prod, a very technical project, and then so many things along the way. They were able to say, hey, we got this messy thing going on, Jen, go figure it out and fix it.
It's interesting how often we need someone else to reflect our gifts in order to really believe it, really to understand it. You said it was Mary Poppins, right? Yep. Or Mary Poppin?
Mary Poppin, yes.
Mary Poppin, yeah. So thanks to Mary Poppin for putting that mirror in front of you.
Yeah, I was going to say something very similar, Amy. I think it's twofold. I think it is really beneficial for all of us to have context of of what we're doing reflected back from someone else, as you said, Amy. But I also think it's really important for us to recognize the responsibility we have to help communicate those kinds of observations to others. When we notice that someone is doing something way better than anyone you've ever seen before and is best in class in something, it is really important to point it out to them, because there's a couple things that play underneath that. Number one, it probably comes pretty easy to them, and they probably underestimate how unique that gift really is. So let's come back to Jen, your message about you get smart people together and you help them understand and get comfortable with where they're going and how they're going to get there. I think there's another piece that's pretty unique in your ability to distill critical information in a way that is consumable for a larger audience, as well as being able to articulate that path that people really struggle to be able to talk about. And so I'd like to dig one level deeper, because I think you have two really interesting tools in your toolkit, and Amy alluded to them. One is the visual representation. You tend to be able to come up with visual understanding of what's happening.
That even Meg can understand.
Even Meg can understand with her visually impaired ability situation. But the other bit is that you really can suss out what are the big things, because usually a lot of times people tend to get really fixated with a lot of things, and they struggle to figure out what are the three big things, what is the actual core message. What are some of the tactics you use to get people to share the right kinds of information so that you can work that magic?
Yeah, so, some of this is, if some of this varies by the audience and what you're trying to do, but, when we're talking about communicating to a board or an ELT, it's a matter of kind of keeping things simple and straightforward. And, you both have heard me talk about this a lot, and it took me a long time to say it out loud because it sounds pretty juvenile, but I realized that it's a skill that a lot of people are lacking in the business sense, as far as we need to focus on telling a story and telling a narrative. And a story, you'll hear me say it over and over again, has to have a beginning, middle, and an end. And when you're deep in the weeds of something, you tend to skip to the end. People skip over the beginning and the middle. And the beginning tends to be the problem statement, the context. The middle tends to be your options for approaching it, and then the end tends to be your action and your path forward. And again, a lot of people stew at that action path forward and start to spin there because they haven't really focused on the problem statement and getting themselves aligned to that, and then also aligned to the options that they have in front of them for addressing that. Kind of let me, an example of that is, the fact of, we're in the midst of this meaty thing at PlanSource right now. And, it is something that we kind of had some people who are passionate about one direction, some people that were passionate about the other direction. What I realized really quickly was that people thought they were agreeing on something, but they weren't. When you sat down and really, really listened to them, they were kind of talking over and around each other because they had not aligned on what the problem statement was and what the options. They kind of agreed on the path forward, but not necessarily the beginning. Thus, that meant that their path forward really wasn't aligned in the end. So in that case, to oversimplify something, I spent a lot of time listening to folks. And one of my key things, which you both know well, is I put crap on paper for people to respond to. So you can talk and talk and talk and even whiteboard all you want, but until it's in front of somebody in writing or in visual format that they can react to, a lot of times there's disconnects underneath the surface. And I have zero ownership over the first 10 iterations of something I present. I actually get nervous if I'm doing this and telling the story and people agree with version number 1. Because if they agree with version number one, I'm like, oh crap, we're still not talking the same language. Like, I need people to come back and tell me the messy stuff and tell me to put their words in it. And I can debate them. I have my opinion on stuff and I'll hold my ground when I'm passionate about something. But for the most part, early on is me trying to sift out those key terms, those key words, the whys that people have behind it, and start embedding that in the story in a logical place so that then I can truly see where the disconnects are and have good solid discussions about how to bring people together. And I do a lot of that via, socializing. It takes time. It's those one-on-one conversations rather than presenting in a big group. How do you take it around? How do you listen? Put some words in from that person, put some words in from the other person. And again, just keep doing that and synthesizing things, until it gets to a place where you're like, all right, now I know where the fundamental disagreements are, and we can then have real conversations about that versus conversations that aren't going to get us to the desired outcome.
It seems to me that there is a whole lot embedded in your understanding of the nature of listening, but also your methodology around how you vet and how you realize who all the stakeholders are and what they're trying to solve for. I feel like a lot of times people struggle with this, either because it feels exhausting to them or because they're just really bad at it. And so even though they go through the steps, they don't have the right skill to truly understand what people are saying because they just have so much of their own, I'm not sure if it's ego or point of view, forward leaning. So how do you coach people who want to do this, but really struggle with building the roadmap out of who do they need to listen to and how do they need to remove themselves and make space so that they actually hear not just what's said, but what's needed?
Yeah, so it's a great question because I'm actually mentoring a few people on just that right now. And honestly, like my biggest source of advice on that is like if you can land yourself some kind of chief of staff role, in an organization to hone those skills, like that is a key way because a chief of staff is really about being the proxy for, a senior executive and kind of helping mirror and, formulate their voice into something. And by being a chief of staff and head of strategy, earlier in my career, that's really where, I was able to develop those skills. And it helped because that was the nature of the role. Not saying that you can't do it if you don't get a chief of staff role, but that is always my key advice to people is that if you have some natural gifts, hone them by seeking out some, doesn't have to be even a chief of staff title, but that type of role where you're partnering with an executive to helping them understand their voice and getting their business priorities through. So that's the first piece. The second piece, and I think you nailed it on the head, which is sometimes easier said than done. And trust me, I still have my bad days with it, and letting the ego go. I think both of you have seen me on days where I'm like really tired and have been through something. I've gone through the 10 iterations and might be on 50 iterations and thought we're done. And then somebody comes in and is like, well, what about this? And I'm like, oh gosh, here we go again. So take that for what it is, that is going to be part of the process. Sometimes you're just going to have a day where you're like, oh crud, I thought I was done with this and we're over, but take a deep breath and move on. But for the most part, it is letting go of that ego. And for the most part, it is seeing every conversation as a learning experience. And I'm very passionate about learning about the businesses and learning about the voices of various people and bringing those voices together because in the end, a leadership team can only be successful if they have a shared voice. And you guys all know one of my favorite things is when leadership teams are saying the exact same words. They might have their little spin on them, but when I'm able to feed them all nuggets, and they can bring their wording and their phraseology together, and they're then speaking from the same hymnal, the same talk track, that's when you got it. And that takes time, and that's a success that, like, a lot of people, and I don't want them to look at me and say, thanks, Jen, for that, but I'm like, cheers, we did it. We're getting there.
And so what about when you get conflicting information or opinions and from different people, or even just the same person, right? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, a lot of that is, some of it, I'll be honest, is just time. Some of it is kind of taking a step back and really thinking about underlying motivations. So in my experience, a lot of times when an individual is giving you conflicting information for once, it is often because they have two voices going on in their head, and they don't really know they're doing it. They just have two influences, So for an example, it might be a CEO who has experience from a past company that they're bringing forward is one of their voices, whereas they now have a chief growth officer at their new company who they just hired for their experience, who's another voice in their head. And then they potentially have a board member who has a PE operating playbook, and they are trying to rationalize these three voices in their head to formulate their own opinion. And sometimes you just have to let them talk through that. And give them space and not call out the conflict. But what I'll do in those cases is try to think through what those voices could be, and then again do the tactic of put something on paper which I think might be the winning voice, and let them react to it, but not be as passionate about it, that know that, like, all that is doing is challenging them to pick a voice and challenging them to pick the story that they're confident in telling to the broader organization or to the board.
So Jen, I'm guessing that if we turned your camera, we would see a therapy couch on the other side of your desk.
Luckily, there's a dog bed over there. Anybody's always welcome to it.
I think the pets are on it, though.
It sounds like you give people the space to, like, get all their shit out on the table, and in parallel to you kind of figuring it out, they're figuring it out, but you like kind of accelerate their self-understanding and their self-awareness.
Yeah, and I think in that, just to add something, I think one of the things I've learned, I think this is just over the last 2 to 3 years. I don't even think I had a deep appreciation for this when I was working with you all, because we were so close and at such a network. But as I've kind of continued to evolve in my career, I've realized that being an executive leader can be a really lonely space. There's, everybody's got their leader friends, everybody, even my current leadership team now adore them. We're very close, and I feel like we can be really transparent with them. But there's not a lot of space or time for working through stuff with somebody else who understands what you're going through. And I think when you're talking about topics like this, like building a business case, defining the growth strategy for the business, providing a space for these leaders who in their head have all these voices that are lonely to work through some of this stuff themselves. And I mean, there's many times I've gotten into a conversation like, do you want help resolving that? And they'll be like, no, all good. But, I will take all that in and, like I mentioned, put it on the paper for them. But you realize that a lot of times they're really just working through. And Amy Wilson, you're a keen person for that because you have that innovator mind. And I took me a minute to learn from you that you just needed to talk your ideas out, and you were brainstorming live with me because you didn't have a lot of space in your day to do that. And I needed to listen and be like, do you really want help? And you're like, nope, got it. I'm all good.
Yeah, I think we don't talk enough about how hard it is to have answers for things that are both complex and really important. And I think when, a business case is a place where it really, the rubber meets the road on this, because you're trying to do something new. You're trying to get people aligned that this is the right thing. And by people, I mean the stakeholders who can make or break that business case. And you're doing it with imperfect information because, of course, no business case has been completely proven. So to your point about having multiple voices and multiple stakeholders, I think there's a lot of really strong skill building in the process of a business case that is useful ongoing. And I think one of the things that you're highlighting here is that it doesn't have to be perfect to start the conversation. I think a lot of times people want to have everything buttoned up before they start sharing it. And I think you're highlighting that actually best practice is to think of it as a group iteration for which you start to refine not only what it is you're doing, how you're doing it, but the language that you communicated and how you're going to measure success. And so I think that this path gives a lot more space for not being sure, which I think more and more of us need as we look to the future, because right now there's a whole lot of things we can see are shifting and disrupting in the market. But which path is going to work? Do we change our pricing? Do we become priced based on results, or do we stick with per seats? Do we trust the fact that interest rates are going to come down again, and therefore our capital will be more abundant soon? Or do we take seriously that we can't really predict when our next fundraise is, and therefore we need to think about cost cutting and how we're going to drive efficiency? What about how AI is playing into it? Should we be hiring more people or not hiring anyone because we're going to be AI first? Or should we build it ourselves or partner with someone else? I mean, any one of these questions has no perfect answer right now. They're all just guesses in a direction. And so getting more stakeholders aligned on this is super important. And it's also important to the learning process.
Yeah, and just, to add to that, kind of one thing I skipped over, but that you just reminded me of, is the fact that kind of one of my early on strategies, which again, both of you know well, is the fact that I actually work very hard early in a business case process to separate the financial business case from the story. So in the story, all I'm saying is, hey, we need this to save us X points in EBITDA, or we need this to get us, single digit growth. I'm in parallel working with finance behind the scenes to validate that, but and to make sure that we can deliver on that. But all I'm taking is those high level assumptions of giving people the story of what do we need to achieve in order to make this successful without specific metrics, and then tie that into the financials when it's ready. Because if you get too lost in the knee-deep financials, you lose track of the story, and almost 100% of the time I've seen it happen is your business case ends up failing because you haven't pushed the business case to be what it needs to be in order to deliver on the story.
I think that's genius, and I really want to dig a little more there, because I believe that if you start with only the financial story and think that's your story, you actually paralyze execution and you actually paralyze strategy, because it's the business case that gives you the foundation, that story gives you the foundation to get all of the parts of the business working towards that goal. And it's only a subset that really are sort of deeply rooted in the financial metrics in a way that's actionable for them. So by having you separate those two, not forgetting, obviously, it's the end of the day, if it's not backed with good financial heft, it's not going anywhere. But making sure that you can communicate more than just abstraction to people is really, really important. And so what you're doing is you're grounding them in truth in a language they understand, and not everybody understands the financial one.
AI is the biggest example of that, because if you get yourself spun up on an AI business case right now, specifically an efficiency one, and you approach it only from a financial perspective and not the story perspective, you're not going to move fast enough because, specifically for us, which I think a lot of companies are similar to us in the fact that like we are a services enabled software business in the end of the day, so when we're driving efficiencies, it is literally about being able to scale the business for growth versus true cost cutting, and that is a much easier story to build a narrative around and then build the case behind it. Whereas if you started with the financials and said, we're driving at this from true cost savings perspective, but we want to grow at the same time, that story gets real confusing.
Do you think that's what Klarna did? The Klarna case where they, right?
Yeah, you end up double counting a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's very, very easy to do. We find ourselves doing it almost every day, but we catch ourselves because we're doing it as a financial exercise and not tossing those numbers in front of the board where you're held to them. We're being very methodical about them, but scalability and cost savings are almost with AI, or especially from an operational efficiency perspective, you can get redundant and double count very, very easily.
Mm-hmm. How do you avoid that?
So separate them. So what I say is so when we're building, so I say, hey, I'm going to continue to work with finance behind the scenes. We're going to keep working together and with our teams on the ground related to the finance piece. But from a story perspective, I'm getting our leadership team aligned on what do we want to do. So leadership team, what do we want to do and what commitments can we and do we want to make to the board? Is that commitment top line growth? If that commitment is top line growth, are we going to still commit to EBITDA expansion at the same time? And how big is that EBITDA expansion? Because we're talking about saving on an individual implementation, things like that, 15-20%, which can add up fast. But when you're growing at a double-digit clip, you're consuming that extra capacity with growth. And so, hey, maybe we can give you a point or two on EBITDA versus 15% on EBITDA. So things like that. What is that story that we want to tell? And then we kind of back the business case into it. It's very valid, and we check the numbers, and they always change a little bit, but if you get aligned to that story first, then you can work on the business case, make sure you can align.
So Jen, so much of your process is the magic of alignment and listening and all of that to develop the story. But I know that there's also a whole lot of other stuff that you're doing to educate yourself and to prepare your own perspective. How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes from, I kind of going back in time. I was an accounting major in college, wanted to be a math teacher. My mom told me I had to get a job that actually paid the bills, so I decided to become an accounting major.
Did you get any awards?
I did not get any awards.
Oh, that's
disappointing. I bet your mom's really disappointed in you.
Yes. Yes, definitely. And I was an accountant for several years, public accountant, got my CPA, and then went on to practice accounting before switching to system implementations. I just have this passion for numbers and the power of numbers, and then kind of building this story kind of on top of them has been the additive element that I've really focused on developing, because I realized that a lot of people who can do numbers can't often, tell the story bit, and that's where I've had some fun in my career and really learned a lot. So from a perspective standpoint, I get really passionate about the numbers. Again, I try not to lead the witnesses too much associated with that, but I always have a point of view about where I want and think the numbers can land. And I will challenge people if things aren't going the direction that I see as possible. The other passion that I have is execution, and I think that is something that often gets lost in the strategy and transformation bit. I always call it, sorry for anybody listening who's from McKinsey, Bain, all of that, but there's McKinsey, Bain, strategy, transformation folks who can draw pretty pictures and tell the story, but actually how do we get it done? It tends to trail off, and that's probably because they're third party external, not internal. I'm very passionate about making sure that when I'm putting something on paper, when we're getting something approved by a board, that we're actually going to deliver on it. Perfect example is, we went as PlanSource, we went to our board recently for, some business cases. We got approved. I was just talking to some people this week and they all agreed with me, but I'm like, hey guys, we can't ask for more until we do what we just already said we're going to do. And they're like, okay, Jen, fine. But I feel very personal that my name is on the line, even though it's our entire leadership team and our CEOs who are taking this stuff. Like, I will throw my personal reputation up there sometimes and be like, guys, I personally can't do this, unless you show me otherwise. And having that personal tie to make sure that you have the trust of your board, your leadership team, and your entire organization to say, if you're going to put your names on the line to do something, that you're actually going to get it done and make the magic happen and not just stop at the words on a sheet of paper.
So we're going to run out of time, I can tell, and I've got tons I want to know, but there's actually, I think, one really big part of this, and that is, okay, so we're mostly been talking about all the pre-work that happens to present and get approval for a business case. So you've done all this work, you've gotten all this alignment, you've got your story, you've got your numbers. You go to the stakeholders, which is most likely the board, and you present this case, and we did discuss, okay, when that gets approved, making sure you have an execution plan. But let's talk about the other side of it, of what happens when they say no. Because I think that this is something that I don't think enough people mentally prepare for. And I do think that even though you get a no, you should use that as a opportunity to gather more insight and actually more credibility with the board. So what is the playbook you would recommend to people to execute when they get to that moment in the meeting and they realize a no is coming, right? What do they do in the meeting, and then what do they do after the meeting?
Don't cry in the meeting. Don't do that.
Good advice. Wait till after the meeting.
Wait till after the meeting to cry. Okay. I think it is just asking, and our good friend Jill Popelka is a master of this, and this is whenever I feel the no coming from a board, I'm like, channel my inner Jill Popelka and smile and have the conversation and ask why. It's not worth arguing about, especially in the construct of a board meeting. If you're in a smaller session one-on-one with board members, that's when you can kind of have a debate about it. But if you're in the actual board meeting and the no is coming, you just got to accept that, they're there, they're saying no. And the best use of your time is to ask why, and to ask questions and to really listen, and to really understand, is this really a hard and fast no? And if it's a hard and fast no, what can I learn from it to get the next time? Or is this a no because you did not listen, and you did not present this to me in a way that I can understand and believe that we're going to achieve the desired outcomes? And if it's B, there is an opportunity to regroup. And my experience is about, if you're taking something to board, especially with a senior leadership team, you should bat about 85% falling in the B category. There's going to be 15% where it's just a hard and fast no, and you got to put your tail between your legs, go on and say, all right, maybe we roll that thing up into another business case later, but, we're not going to continue to fight that fight.
So I would add a couple things that I think are really important for people, because I think this is understanding the no is so important. So to your point about not crying, you really have to protect yourself from your amygdala hijack, the point when your brain is just melting down because you're so disappointed. This is the moment actually where your career is built, because the way people around the board table see you in moments of disappointment really informs how they trust you in the future. So keep in the back of your mind that you went in with a high stakes goal, and you knew going in that one of the possible answers was no. Be prepared emotionally for what you're going to do in that moment. So again, being curious, super important. Not belaboring it too long. Don't go back and try to convince them out of it. If they say no, it is a no. Don't make it worse or make it seem like you're not listening. I think it's useful to come back with, okay, I hear you, and then potentially say, I will come back with some recommendations on what will happen instead, because I had been building plans potentially with this as the path forward. So make it clear that the no does come with some impacts to the business in a way that helps them feel empowered by that decision. And then remember that the thing that you should be proud of is that not only did you take a risk and were you brave, but you showed up with a lot of integrity and a lot of curiosity, and the board can see that and will value that and appreciate that. So don't miss that opportunity because you put all of your emotional energy in a yes and did not prepare yourself for a potential.
Yeah, and I would just like a quick point to add on to that. What we do, which is led by our CEO, which I find brilliant, is we do a lot of prep for these type of conversations in a board meeting, and we actually assign roles on the leadership team to say, all right, if this is going a yes direction, Jen, you keep going. If we see a no coming, we shift accountability for then who is talking and who is engaging, kind of to what you said, to take that brain space out of it so it becomes kind of less personal. When we, depending on the topic, we rotate that, but we have, kind of very specific, understood kind of rules of engagement based on how we think these discussions are going.
That's genius.
Yeah,
I love that.
really cool.
All right, well, shall we switch to Leadership Corner?
Absolutely.
Would you like to join us? It's our tradition.
I love it. I'm so excited.
All right. Well, we have a question from a friend of the show, and here we go. I thought my manager was a sponsor, but he seems to be taking credit for my work. How do I turn this around?
By the way, this is not a unique challenge. I think this happens to everyone in their career. And, honestly, sometimes you just have to look at it. And, in my experience, one, say what a compliment. What a compliment it is that a senior leader is seeing so much value in their work that they are owning that, especially to their higher ups throughout the organization. You don't get a higher compliment, and a lot of leaders will not take work, and that's also disappointing and discouraging, in a different way. So that's point one. Take the compliment. Point two is have the heart-to-heart conversation with the leader, and don't have the heart-to-heart conversation in you are taking credit for my work and I hate you for that. Have the conversation in the hey, listen, I see that you're taking my work and you're showing it to the leadership team. I am so grateful for that. I am so grateful that I've mastered your voice in a way that you feel comfortable doing that. But I want to grow in my career and I want the opportunities to share some of this myself. How can we best do that? And if you come up with some ideas. So if for example, that your team has a monthly business review, be like, hey, is there an upcoming monthly business review with the leadership team that I can come to and I can present our materials, or some other thing, come with ideas associated with it. Be proactive and be positive about it. And I bet your leader will be more receptive than you think to that. They probably don't even realize that they're doing it, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say making it more about how can you help me increase my visibility, that sort of thing. And with ideas, but really asking the person for help in terms of your career and so on. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's a very nuanced point and to Jen's point, it's going to happen. So you really do need to be prepared for it. And you also need to be, to make sure you're grounded in your own story. So your job is to make your boss look good. Like that is a big part of your job. And that is a very great way to be successful at your job. So making sure that you don't get so hung up in needing the prize or the award that you get in the way of the bigger success and the bigger win is important. But to Amy's point, I completely agree. Getting into the conversation early, what your needs are for your own professional growth. And typically when it's a credit challenge, what you're actually yearning for is better visibility and also better access to information. So position it as that, ask for that, and use that to also make your boss look good. And again, create more wins. So you're not so scarcity mindset of like, oh, I need credit for this thing because this is the only thing I've ever done. Like use it as a launch pad to make the pie bigger and to really open up new opportunities for yourself.
Now, in some cases, the boss is doing it on purpose and they are, a dick. So in that case, I think it's always important to diversify kind of your sponsors and people who know what you're doing and that sort of thing. But in this case in particular, so what are ways do you ladies, have you done this in the past of like kind of getting other people to know about your work besides your boss, right?
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, I think that's just a matter of having the confidence to reach out to people and kind of work through and bring them into the process. In that case, you are going to have to also sacrifice a little bit of ego because you're going to have to say, like, I need your help with this. Like, I want your help and I want your voice in this because honestly, if you are experiencing that, they're probably doing the same thing to their fellow leaders, but you're not going to run to a peer of theirs and say, hey, listen, he's like stealing my work, and he's being a jerk about it. You can get to that information in the same way by going to them and saying, I need your help. I want to hear your voice. I want to understand like where you're coming from because I'm not sure I'm hearing all the different parts of it, and have those conversations and really listen to them about it. And kind of hopefully via that you get their sponsorship and share their voice.
The other thing I would say is outside of like when you're trying to deconstruct getting credit for something you've already done, it's a little bit too late, right? So what you're doing is applying learnings to the next go around. And so I think getting good at the map of stakeholders and of voices that are influencers and holders of power in your world matters. You should be doing this well before the moment that you're trying to get credit or get someone on your side or get a sponsor. You should be starting from that point of view. Who is the holders of power in my world? Who have outsized voices? Who could I learn from? And then you need to figure out how to put yourself in situations where you're interacting with those people more. And you should actually even bring this to the boss that's taking credit for your work and saying, hey, I would like to have an opportunity to work more with this person over here because I think they're really impressive to me. Is there a way that you could introduce that idea, on my behalf or something like that? So use all of your tools and be strategic in general about who is important for your career and who are the people that are talking about you in rooms you're not in. These are important things to be doing all the time.
What Meg said.
Yeah, that's what I always say. Ditto. Yeah.
Ditto. What Meg said.
Oh gosh, I love you guys.
So Jen, before we say goodbye, any final thoughts for our audience?
No, just thank you so much, Meg and Amy, for having me. Really appreciate it. And if there's ever a chance to come back, I'm all game. I'm so glad you guys started this podcast. You have so much wisdom to share with the world.
Yeah, and we do have to say, like, true test of BFFs, we all decided yellow was the color today. So, well done us.
And that was not in my prep email, even.
It was not in the prep email, no. This was just the vibe. Yeah.
Thank you, ladies, so much. Appreciate it.
Love you, Jen.
Bye. Love you.
Bye.
What a joy to have our friend Jen on the show.
There's just nothing better than a girlfriend sharing wisdom, man.
Yeah, that's the best. All right. Well, what were some of the key takeaways from Jen's building a business case?
Yeah, well, first off, you sort of feel like someone that plays rec ball that just talked to a professional sports person and realized, wow, I'm just not even, I understand some of the words, but I'm just not at that level. But one of the things that I was reminded of was that piece about separating the financial part of your business case from the story and the purpose. And there is so much nuance under that, but that is so powerful. And I don't know that I've ever heard anybody say that out loud to me before.
Yeah.
And it just makes so much sense. That's where everything starts to get wrapped up and confused.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's almost like seeing the forest through the trees, right? Like when you start digging into the financials and everybody's like all focused on that, it's just, you're just focusing on all those individual trees and you can't make your way out.
And I realized this is not just a problem for business cases, but like everybody designing OKRs and all of these things. I feel like it always seems that you have people that start at different parts of the flow, and mapping those two things up becomes much harder, but doing it Jen's way is genius.
Jen is a master.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So smart. Well, we are blessed to have her join us and to know her. You have no idea how much we text her with questions and asking all the stupid questions about pets, about financials, about business plans, about all the things. So,
and speaking of financials, next week we will be talking about financial independence. From basic security to financial freedom. Some of the tips that we'll be talking about, I think we've learned from Jen, even maybe. I don't know.
Definitely. And one of the things we forgot to mention, which is like a real tragedy, is that it is both Jen and Meg's birth month this July. So just in case you didn't realize that, happy birthday wishes are welcome throughout the month of July. So go early, go often, and don't forget.
And Meg prefers her birthday wishes in the form of cute baby or pet photos.
Cute baby or pet photos, nice words or comments, or acts of service towards others. So making somebody else's day better. Also, tell me about that. I like that.
Well, thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. Please do subscribe and share and send in your Leadership Corner questions. It's been fun to receive those.
Let's invent the future together. I believe in us.
Make every day count.